Welcome back to the Former Fat Friend podcast. Tonight, I have a very special guest joining me. This is Athena. Athena and I actually connected on Instagram. She found the podcast, was an avid listener of the podcast, and we connected over DMs and got to know each other there. And she has had a really interesting story in terms of her weight loss and bariatric surgery. So at the age of 28, Athena had gastric band surgery. She had that surgery at a high weight of 296 pounds, and she lost an incredible over 175 pounds in less than a year. And then she had that gastric band for 13 years until she started to have some complications that caused her to need that removed in 2023. And at that time, she had a gastric sleeve surgery. And she's been just continuing her weight loss journey. She is really kind of searching for that root cause of her weight gain, which I think so many of us can relate to. And she's used a variety of tools, training, education, a real focus on nourishing foods along the way to help manage the symptoms of obesity and to help her kind of figure out what that why is. And so I'm excited to get to know Athena a little bit more. I'm excited for her to share her story with you. So Athena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. We're just excited to get to hear your story. So I know I gave a little bit of your background, but I think what's interesting about you is that you have this like very long experience with treating obesity, using bariatric surgery and tools to treat that obesity. But I'd love to hear a little bit more from your perspective of kind of just who you are, how you ended up in this position of deciding to have gastric band surgery and sort of what led you to that place.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I didn't really view myself as a very heavy child. I wasn't skinny, but I was always the tallest kid in the class, which is not an uncommon story. I know a lot of people deal with that. So by nature of that, you're going to be bigger than other people. And so I remember my mom was a dietitian. So I grew up in a house full of health food of whatever 80s variety that was, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember the first time my mom's concern for my weight was around like 13 years old. You know, even if you're at 13, if you're 10 or 15 pounds overweight, it's a bigger deal. And so she, of course, had achieved her lifetime goal at Weight Watchers, and she took me to Weight Watchers, which is, I couldn't possibly think of a more devastating place to be. I hated it. It was tragic. I hated being in a group setting. I hated hearing people's stories. I hated everything about it because in my heart, I wasn't that. I wasn't that. And I felt like people were putting me somewhere that I didn't belong. And so then it was like you've said before, where you didn't have like this weight loss and then gain and yo-yoing. It was just a very slow, steady progression over years. And it just crept up. By the time I was 28, I was married to my first husband and was in a very tragic relationship. It was really poor. And I remember going to my bariatric doctor. I had talked to a family member and they had mentioned something that they had used. And so I found a local doctor in Canada who did band surgery. And I went to him and he's like, well, what is the reason? I said, listen, I'm in a terrible relationship. I'm not even going to deny that. And this is going to go on and I'm going to be 5 million pounds because I can't see any other way of coping with this. And this marriage isn't going to end because when you're raised the way I was, you don't think that out is an option. Yeah. And so I thought, well, I better do something. And of course, as you start gaining weight and your relationship is so poor, you blame the weight for why that dysfunction is there. If only I was thin, then he would be better and I would be better and I wouldn't be going through this. So he assured me that is not the case. I have a really great surgeon as a personal being. He's a lovely man. He's really fantastic. And I've known him for years now because he also performed this surgery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so he always believed the best in me and told me I could lose weight if, he believed in me. And I was like, stop believing in me. It is not helping me get.
Yeah.
So at 28, I chose the band. And the reason I chose the band, the one that I had was um, it's more like the lap band brand is a very sturdy, hard piece of material.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that my surgeon was using was, I don't know if you ever get broccoli and it has those really wide, thick rubber bands on them, like the blue
Yes.
rubber bands.
Yeah.
It felt more like that.
So was it adjustable?
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
so they would be able to, had a port and they would be able to put fluid in and out.
I see.
Yeah. And so that worked really well. And at about 80 pounds in, my ex had gone on a trip and I realized that this wasn't really something I had to keep enduring. And so that year that I lost weight, I could contribute some of it to the band, of course, but it was an epic, stressful year.
Hmm.
And, you guys have talked about before, like, does that mean the end of a relationship? It doesn't have to,
Yeah.
because this surgery is not going to end in an ended relationship. But that one did. It was necessary. It was it ended with police. It was really bad.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay.
yeah, so it was a good decision because it afforded me confidence and something that I was lacking.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So what do you, I have so many questions, but
sorry, that was a lot.
no, that's so interesting. So you had mentioned that you had kind of this like steady gain, which I can totally relate to. I was never a yo-yo dieter, but I did try a lot of diets. I just was never successful. Did you also try to lose weight on your own and just couldn't do it? What was that? What led you to the point of being like, I need some intervention like gastric band surgery?
Oh, yeah, it was that constant lack of success. And I couldn't I was always someone who worked out. I was fortunate enough to have had family members who introduced me to the gym at 15 years old. My brother and his wife were bodybuilders.
Oh, wow.
They were like, okay, she's a strong girl, so let's give her something to be strong about,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I loved that introduction. I worked out in the gym for years and years. I actually, after getting the band, got certified as a personal trainer.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, there's a reason for it too. It's funny because once you've gone through that process, I felt like I never wanted someone to be able to say to me, well, you just didn't have the knowledge, or you just didn't have this, or it's just this tool. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I have now all the pieces of the knowledge and my body and have applied it. And without this, it still doesn't happen for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm curious as like I'm just always curious about anyone who struggles with their weight. So like you did have the knowledge, you did try to lose weight. What do you think changed when you had the gastric band that allowed you to finally be successful with weight loss?
Well, the band is a really lovely tool in that it has a significant amount of restriction.
Mm-hmm.
And with that restriction um, comes a freedom, like the not thinking about food is the freedom that I seek.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to think about it anymore. I don't want to examine it anymore. It didn't mean that I didn't want to choose and examine healthful foods, because that's a huge part of where I'm at right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I was exhausted by the chasing down of what it was. My brain was tired. I just
Yeah.
couldn't do it anymore. Right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
tired.
it's kind of like I can distinctly remember I was probably maybe a month or two out from surgery, probably a little longer than that actually. And I was sitting on my couch and I had this realization that I don't know what to do with all of my time when I'm not constantly thinking about food and my next meal and what's the next thing I'm going to eat. And you don't even realize how all consuming that is until it's taken away. And it's like, yeah, it's so freeing. It's just this incredible mental weight that gets lifted. And I think that's really hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced that. And it's one of the reasons why I think, at least for me, and it sounds like probably for you too, a lot of these previous diet attempts never worked because in some ways that they made those thoughts about food even more intense and even more chronic and all consuming than they already were all the time.
Yes, could not agree more. Yeah. And the band was, to me, I still have a heavy amount of remorse not having that tool. I loved that tool. It was a part of my being. About 2 years ago, I went in with what I believe was like a fungal or some sort of infection in my stomach. And the doctors, especially the bariatric doctors in Canada, do not believe that is a very good tool anymore. They have certain brands have built themselves a good repertoire reason for that. Mine, however, doesn't grind into the stomach. It doesn't wear the outside of the stomach. It didn't do all the things that they thought it would probably be doing. So unfortunately, I didn't have the surgeon, because I was in a different province, available to me to say, no, that's not what's happening here. There's something else. And this particular doctor had such a beef about the band. And it was he was very insistent. And so because I was at the stage where I wasn't even able to swallow my saliva and there was no fluid in my band.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they have pictures of my stomach from 2 years before. So it wasn't a slippage where it was causing obstruction. There was something in there. I did a barium swallow, which was very painful and hard to do when you're dealing with that. And none of that was indicating that something was wrong. So I had no choice. I wasn't able to swallow my saliva. I couldn't leave the hospital. So I was either take it out or walk out of the hospital. And unfortunately, they weren't willing to entertain that there was some other issue there and do some testing for that. So I just had to surrender. And I let it go. And it still is something, if I think about it, that brings tears to my eyes. That was like the best tool ever. I loved it. Yeah. If I could have got that band again, like if I could have hunted it down, because it's like a fret from France, I would have.
Oh. Yeah, that is so interesting because I had bariatric surgery in 2021. And when I was doing research then, everything that I read was like very anti-band. It was like, oh, they cause problems long term. But you had yours for 13 years. No problems in those 13 years?
Nothing.
And when they took it out, did they eventually find what the cause of the problem was?
No. I was actually hoping that they were right so that I wouldn't be so angry at them. So I was hoping, like, prove me wrong. And they're like, no, your stomach is perfect. You're on the outside. Because what they're worried about is that it's causing wear.
Right.
And no, we still do not, I have an opinion. I have a feeling of what it could have been. A few months before, I had been working with a doctor who prescribed Ozempic for me. So my surgeon has a doctor that he works with. And it really just gave me it was really hard on my stomach. So it wasn't a tool for me.
Okay. Got it.
So last summer, it was the summer of 2023. The summer of 2023, I had been working with, my surgeon has a doctor who is a team of dietitians and a doctor, a hormone therapist, everything. Like they all work together to deal with patients who deal with obesity. So they go through like a whole program. And so I had still had the band, and I said, but I'm struggling with tightening it right now for some reason. If I tighten it even just a little bit, it's too tight. So there was something, but we couldn't figure out what was going on. And who knows if that could have just exasperated it. But I had such bad stomach problems, and it was very slow rolled. Like he slow rolled me on it, like very tiny amounts. And I still just had such a bad effect. So it's just not a tool for me. Maybe different ones will be in the future if I ever need them. The other thing that he did prescribe for me that has been a really useful tool is Vyvanse.
Okay.
Yeah, so for people who are, we talked a lot about the percentages of people who struggle with obesity who are ADHD or ADD.
Yeah.
And I remember my brother suggesting it when I was like 19, and I took the book he gave me and I threw it across the room, and I'm like, I don't have that. I was like, no. So I've never have been officially diagnosed with it, but the doctor was willing to use that to apply to the situation. And so he asked me, how do you feel on it? Like, do you like it? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the best thing in the whole world. I'm so functional. It calms all the noise in my head down. I get so much done, and I'm super organized. My thoughts are just right on the right train. And I don't have to worry about food. I don't have to think about it. So
Yeah,
it calmed my brain down.
it sounds like that it does for you what a lot of people describe GLP-1s doing as like reducing that food noise in your brain,
Yeah.
which makes sense. And I think, the more I learn and the more I talk to people, I think I am realizing it's so much of this is in your head, and we need to fix the brain part and also the physical part. And it makes
Yeah.
sense that these tools really do kind of go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah.
So, okay, so after you had the band taken out, how long? I know you eventually ended up having a gastric sleeve surgery, but what happened in those couple of years after you had the band removed?
It was just like my nightmare. It was just that slow, progressive climb. And what was frustrating is now you have a lot of people who are saying, oh, with chronic dieting, you're under eating. And so what you really need is to increase your food intake. And women should be eating, like 2,000 to 3,000 calories. And I'm getting this information, and I'm like, I'm a busy woman. I have my sedentary moments, but I have a not a sedentary job, as well as a job that I do that is sitting, like I do lash extensions. So I sit. But I also have a job where I do like 15,000, 2,000, 20,000 steps at night. Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it springs back and forth. So, okay, maybe that's what it is. Maybe the problem is that I just underfed my body the whole time. Such crap. And it also frustrates me when you're on social media and you see these girls and they're like, oh, I ate 2,800 calories today. I'm like, you're a liar. You're 5'1". If I ate 2,800 calories at 5'1", I'd be 5'1" wide. I just have a hard time with whether or not they're telling the truth on that. So
Yeah, I mean, I mathematically it doesn't make sense that under eating would cause you to gain weight. I could see it being a problem if you're, dealing with like muscle wasting and you're trying to preserve muscle, sure, but yeah, I know what you mean. I think we've always been told like, oh, you're not eating enough. That's why you're gaining weight. And it's like, well, I don't know if that actually adds up, but
Well,
okay.
these girls are using this starvation experiment that was done, this certain study that was done in the United States. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's called the starvation experiment. And that's what they're basing this theory on. And it just does not apply to my body. So in 2020, I had started kind of like looking into just a lot of things around health and that sort of thing. Like what is in food? Because of course we had a lot of time to do that. So I was
Yeah.
looking at what was in food and what food was created. And I started to understand my girlfriend was pregnant. So I was learning a lot about how fat cells form in the body during pregnancy and how what you eat affects the fat cells that the child will have in the future.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, that's fascinating. I learned about the microbiome of the stomach and how if you are like a C-section versus a vaginal birth, and how that poor microbiome from not going through the canal can have an effect on obesity in your life because you have not put the important things inside the gut.
It's fascinating.
It's wild. And then,
Yeah.
I started learning about pesticides and herbicides because, of course, I started gardening because who didn't start gardening
Yeah.
or baking bread or whatever. So, yeah, I started looking into all that stuff. And because at the time I had opened my band in 2020, I opened it to see if I could experiment with having it less tight. Like,
Okay.
is this something that I can do on my own?
Mm.
Right? Because that's apparently the ultimate goal in life is if you're not doing it on your own, then did you do it at all? I mean, I worked out 6 days a week when I was losing weight. I worked out so hard, but that didn't matter because I had the tool. So does it
That's so,
count?
it's interesting that even with all of your years of success that you still had this in the back of your mind of like, maybe I just need to prove that I can do it
Yeah.
on my own.
Yeah.
It's like
Which
so
was why
deeply.
why I was so secretive. Like none of my friends know.
Still?
And no,
Really?
like my dearest of dearest friends, there is not a single person who knows. Like this is a
Wow.
huge coming out of the closet moment here.
Yeah.
If they ever stumble upon it, they're welcome to ask me. But I think that part of my story is really important because it's okay for you to keep your medical procedures private.
100%. Absolutely. I agree with that.
And it is nobody's business how you lost weight. And they don't get to, like, I had someone, like a niece who lost weight doing carnivore. And someone saw a picture of her and then they said, oh, she's obviously on Ozempic. We have very high cheekbones. We cannot help that when we lose weight, our face sinks in. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
And now it's, oh, you did it with a drug. Okay, maybe I did, but maybe I didn't. And maybe that's just
Yeah.
how my face is.
And who cares if you
And
did?
who cares?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear you say that because I do think it's reflective of how deeply ingrained that stigma is in all of us, even those of
Mhm.
us who struggle with obesity and even those of us who recognize that we need help and we get help. Like it's really hard. It's really hard to break that stigma and you can imagine if we feel that and we're the ones who are subject to that stigma, imagine what the rest of the world
Oh, yeah.
feels. And it's just, yeah, it's so reflective of how big of a problem that really is.
And those conversations, um, because people don't know that I had that
Yeah.
when I was skinny, I got this insight into humanity. And
Yeah.
you've said this before, like people will say things to you because they don't know that that's that's what you've done. And they
Yeah.
will like open the door to to the inside of who they are.
Yep.
And they'll say derogatory comments about people and weight. And absolutely people are terrible about it.
Yeah. The worst. I mean, the amount of times that people use the word fat as a like to make fun of someone or to disparage someone, it's like sub that for any other term that we have now as a culture deemed like definitely not okay
Yeah.
to stigmatize people about, whether it's like race or I don't know, age or gender. And it would be
Yeah.
wildly inappropriate, but people say it still about obesity and fatness. And it's always really disheartening because even though I'm not fat, I still like feel that identity. And so it feels personal. It feels like a personal attack and a
Yes.
personal offense when people say things like that.
Yeah, it was really, so as the weight started coming back on, I was really struggling with seeing people. And we moved to a new area and I was introduced to a bunch of new people and some people who hadn't seen me for years and years and had only seen me maybe on, on my socials or whatever, and I was thin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was introducing people to myself, and we get into maybe a conversation. They talk about what we like to do, and I talk about going to the gym or blah blah blah. And I'm like, I know it doesn't look like it right
Mm,
now, but like I work
yeah.
out 5 days a week. Like even with employment, the employment that I do, I have to not only be as strong as any other person, including men. I have to be faster, stronger, and not tire out. Like I can't get hungry. I can't want to take a break because
Mm,
then it's perceived, and maybe that's partly me, and maybe it's partly them, but it's weakness. Whereas someone who's skinny can go, "Oh, I'm so hungry right now," and they're like, "I bet," because you're skinny. But if you're
yeah.
fat, you say you're hungry, you're like, "Please."
Yeah.
People are like, you have no business being hungry. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Totally relate to that. I think when you're fat, you feel like you need to prove yourself a lot more and you can't let any weakness show because like it just like people will chalk it up to the fact that you're fat. It's like I
Yeah.
had a very funny experience snowboarding last year. I went with my boyfriend and all of his friends, and
Yeah.
I'm just a cautious person in general.
Yeah.
And so we were on these snowboards and not snowboards, snowmobiles.
Yeah.
Um, and they go really fast and they're kind of scary and you're going through these like hills and so you're like bouncing around. And my nature is just to be a lot more cautious. So they were all flying around these mountains on these snowmobiles. And I'm like,
Yeah.
bringing up the rear. And I remember thinking, like, if I were still fat, I would be really embarrassed in this moment because I would think that they thought that the reason I couldn't keep up and I wasn't able to like do what they were doing was because I'm fat, but I'm
Mhm.
not. So it's okay for me to just say like, oh yeah, I just want to go slow. I'm just the last
Totally.
person bringing up the rear, and it is, and I don't know that that's necessarily true. I don't know that any person in that group would have ever thought, oh, here's this fat girl. That's why she can't snowmobile of all things. But my brain tells me that's how the world
Yeah.
would have responded to me. And I think we do that with so many things in our life
Oh
when
yeah.
we struggle with our weight.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously after you took the band out, you had started to regain some weight. When did you decide that you wanted to pursue another bariatric surgery option?
Oh, before I even let it get out of me.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I knew in that moment, I was like, I'm not fighting this my whole life. I'm not
Mm,
doing this. And it also kind of beefed me because one of the surgeons, because I had the illustrious pleasure of having had my band removed by a group of medical students who were observing and learning. So that's like my
oh,
worst
okay.
nightmare, is to be under a bunch of people's microscope
Yeah.
looking at, let's look at the fat girl whose band is breaking. Like that was like my nightmare. So the one doctor said to me, he goes, I was in my regular surgeon is in British Columbia. In Canada, the VSG is covered by our medical. So the vertical sleeve gastrectomy is covered by our medical, like we pay taxes
Hmm.
that cover those, that need if we need it.
That's
So
great.
it is wonderful. There are some caveats to it. So the wait times are really, really long. They usually take about a year and a half.
Mm, okay.
I was in Alberta, but my my surgeon was in British Columbia, those medical systems don't work together. So they would want, so I was kind of, because we had just moved, I was working both a little to see which one would go faster.
Got
It
it.
ended up being the one in British Columbia went faster. But the surgeon, before I even left, he said, you really should get on getting the other surgery. He goes, because you have less than 1% chance of being successful at this on your own.
Hmm.
And I was so pissed at him. I was so pissed. I was like, I was so mad. And I told my other surgeon and the doctor that he has, and he says, I'm sorry that he said that to you. Like no one wants to hear, because we still think that it's personal.
Yeah.
That it's my failing.
Yeah, totally. It's like,
And
yeah, I mean, imagine any other disease that you could have, you wouldn't feel like it was your fault if it came back.
no.
But with obesity, we do still feel that way.
Yeah, I would say that the two health issues that people don't want to hear about your struggle is mental health and
Mm,
obesity.
yep.
You can even be an alcoholic. You can be a drug addict. I mean, in Canada, it's really prevalent. People are drug addicts and alcoholics. The government is fully support, like does lots of supportive things for that, and no one really bats an eyelash. But
Mm,
oh boy, if you're one of those other two areas, like people just do this, like you see the physical distance that they'll put between you in
yeah.
dealing with that.
Yeah.
And I'm too soft, and that's why I commend you at your ability to be on social media the way you are, because I am too soft. Like I would cry. I could not. I couldn't.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I never intended to be on social media in such a like on such a big platform that it's turned into. So it wasn't like a forethought that I had going
Yeah,
into this. But I think I've learned one, I've for better or worse developed a pretty thick skin. But
I love
two,
it.
I've also
Good.
learned just how stupid people are. Like how many
Yes.
really, really dumb people there are in the world.
Yes, I totally agree.
And that makes me feel better because I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I can't help you. I can't fix stupid.
No. No. You really can't. There's nothing you can do for those people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So go ahead.
did you end up having to wait that year and a half to have surgery?
It ended up being a good, yeah, I did one entire year. That is
Okay.
right. It was one entire year I ended up waiting um to get in line, and I said to my surgeon, I'm like, listen, I should get prorated. So the band I paid for myself.
Oh, okay.
That was not at the time. The only surgery that was being covered by our medical was um, bypass surgery.
Okay.
They weren't even doing sleeves at the time when I had my band put on. When I
Hmm.
had the VSG, they have a whole program. So I'm working kind of two programs here, trying to get in either in this province or this province.
Hmm.
And the Alberta one of the things that they had, and they may have that in BC, but I just wasn't put through it because the surgeon knew me and had a history with me. And I had already had success with like I didn't become an alcoholic afterwards. I didn't start using other vices. Like there was a lot of things
Right.
that they want to make sure you're not going to do
Right.
after, like basically transferring your issue from one
Hmm.
thing. So
Yeah.
I had a psych eval here, and she was awesome. She's like, you are so ready for this. She goes, you're one of the most prepared people for this surgery that I've ran into mentally. I said, but it's only because
You've,
I've gone through a lot
yeah.
of this already.
Yeah, you did it already. You already like proved that you could be successful with it, which is rare. Most people
Yeah,
it's kind of an unknown.
yeah, exactly. And then the other doctor, when I was making sure hormones were all in order, because I still wasn't, I still wasn't losing weight even without the surgery. I still wasn't losing weight at a 2000 calorie. So for someone like me, that's still a deficit at that weight.
Yeah.
So I should have been losing. Like, why wasn't it leaving my body? I worked out with weights 5 days a week. I had a busy lifestyle. Like, weight training, it's never been hard to get me in the gym to go lift weights. I'm strong. I love it. I love weight training. Like, it's the best.
Yeah.
When I actually, after I had the band surgery, one of the reasons why I got my certificate was like approving that I wasn't that thing anymore. But also because I hadn't told anyone, I wanted to work with my surgeon to work with bariatric patients.
Oh, that's cool.
So I had surgery on October 15th of 2024. And it was really weird, because I remember sending a message to my surgeon like a week later. I'm like, did you do this? Did you do it? I was so choked.
Yeah.
I was choked because I did not have the immediate, first of all, I healed really well. I worked with a homeopathic doctor, as well as, and even my, what's the guy that puts you under?
Anesthesiologist.
Yeah. Even he said, him and my aftercare nurses were like, oh, we knew you'd be a quick healer because of all the things that you did before. Because I had been through the surgery portion of this, I knew exactly how my body was going to respond. So I went and got like glutathione infusions. I had vitamin B infusions, because glutathione really helps your body deal with anesthetic. And so it's like, I had done everything. I had all my homeopathic remedies. I didn't take a single pain medication after the surgery.
Wow.
None.
That's impressive.
And I was up that night. I was walking around, and we were waiting to get in for our swallow. He always likes to check the stomach to make sure there's no leakage.
Yeah.
So we do the swallow. I don't know if everyone does that. Did you?
I didn't. I think they might have done it when I was under anesthesia, like still on the operating table, but not later.
Oh, okay. So we do it the next day, and the poor other girl that was having it done, she was just heaving. She had a severe reaction to the anesthetic. And so, I was very grateful. I had prepared my body. My body healed super well. I was like, I just was killing this surgery thing. Like, I was so proud of myself. But then I was like, okay, well, I really wanted to not be able to even swallow water for a little bit. Like, I really wanted some restriction, some good restriction. And I didn't have that. I didn't have a really solid restriction. I mean, yes, I had something, but even compared to when I tightened my band, it wasn't the restriction I felt with the band. So I was used to the feeling of restriction. I know what restriction feels like, and this ain't. So then when I got on the phone with the doctor who does my aftercare, I told him, and he goes, well, you should know that it is not a surgery of restriction. The point is to change the signaling. I'm like, no, the point is twofold. It should be signaling and restriction. So anyways, and when I was sitting on the table, because the surgeon comes in and he chats, so I'm sitting up and talking with him. And I said to Dr. Amson, I said, now listen, don't be cheap. Like, you get in there, you take extra if you need to.
Yeah, just cut as much as you want. Give me a little tiny tummy.
Just a little sliver. That's all I need. Yeah. I can drink what I need to drink. I don't need to eat food anymore.
Yeah.
He's like, well, he's always so conservative, and he wants the best for you and the best health. So
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So did you start to feel the restriction more when you introduced solid foods?
Yeah, I was able to eat like red meat in like 2 weeks,
Oh,
3 weeks.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, restriction or maybe the full feeling came much later, and
Interesting.
the not hungry. So initially I was so hungry, like gargling hunger.
Mm,
And uh, all the signals took a little while to kick in. And I was scared. I was
yeah.
really scared. Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard that sometimes it can take some time for, I think it's ghrelin, that's the hunger hormone. Sometimes it can take time for that to actually like fully leave your system. So
Yeah.
it can be a while until you experience that lack of hunger. And then at least for me, it came back within a few months. But I did get a little couple of months reprieve of not ever feeling hungry, which was
So
kind
good.
kind of nice. It's okay that it's back.
Yeah.
So you're just what, 3 months post-op then?
3 months post op.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay. And obviously it sounds like it was very different than the band. Now
Yeah.
that you're 3 months in, uh, what are your thoughts on like how is it going? Are you liking the sleeve now? Do you still wish you had the band instead of the sleeve?
Yeah, I do.
Really? Okay.
The only thing that I very much appreciate about this is actually more healthful in a lot of regards. I taught myself to tighten and loosen my band. So I stopped using doctors. I got the needles, I got everything I needed, and I was managing it myself.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
I had definitely at some points probably misused that skill, and
How
tightened it tighter than I should have.
I don't how does this even work? How do you tighten your own
So
band?
you have a port in your abdomen, and what I would basically do, because I have really, like, for a lot of people they would not be able to do this because their pain signals would be off the charts, but mine aren't like that. I would lay down and I found a video that showed how to do it. And I used a sterile, like a saline solution. And then I was able to get some needles, and that were a specific kind of needle. It's a non-coring needle, so it allows it to go into the port. The port looks very similar to like a stethoscope. So you've got the round big piece and then a smaller piece.
And it's under your skin.
And it's under the skin. And so I'd
Okay.
lay back, put a pillow under my back, and then I'd leave the syringe empty, and I'd enter the port. So I'd have to enter the port and get into the center of it. And I would just do it by feel. And then I would pull all the fluid out to know exactly what was in there. And then I would put it back in, and then I would add more to it if I needed to, or less. So I could adjust it with the fluid.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, it
Can
was
you
really cool.
see the port under your skin?
So my port was really uh, unfortunate. It was tilted a little when he stitched it in. So
Okay.
you could see. I had someone I know who also had the band, and you really couldn't really notice it.
Okay.
Because basically what they do is they carve out a little piece in your fat so that it just lays
Oh, it kind
flush.
of lays flush. I see.
Yeah, but with mine, it was crooked, and it was stitched in crooked, and it was not fixable. It wasn't, you wouldn't have loved it.
Mm. So how were you making those decisions of when to tighten or loosen your own band?
It was so rare. I only had to do it like for a long time, like maybe once a year, and it could,
Okay.
some environmental element could affect it. Like, let's say you have a very high stress life, or
Hmm.
you're in a very stressful situation. Um, then I would feel restriction. Oh, a ton of restriction. And so then I was like, okay, I need to let a little out because now I'm starting to lose hair.
I
Um,
see. Okay.
I'm starting to see the effects of it. So then and I started having really bad habits. So I was living off of milk and Coca-Cola. I was not eating.
That's
So
not great.
I had not fixed some issues. I was just so happy to be skinny, like to be a size 2 or a 4. Oh my God. That was
Yeah.
that was everything. It is not everything now.
No, I'm sure you didn't feel very good living off of milk and Coca-Cola.
I don't know. I still have very fond feelings about that. I have
But ha
fond feelings, but I didn't look good. I mean, I thought I looked rad, but you could see certain aspects. Like I had no pink in my gums. I had no pink in
Oh,
my eye. I was starting to get gray skin. I was
yeah. Oh, that's not good.
thinning hair.
And I would imagine too, for someone who is loves working out and being in the gym, that doesn't bode well for those kinds of activities either.
You're not making muscle gains.
Yeah.
You're not making muscle gains. So it was really cool because like I had all like the striations and the muscle would show and that was great, but I wasn't gaining strength.
Yeah.
And that means something to me now. And like bone density means something to me now. And making sure that I'm not a cripple when I'm old or that I don't get
Absolutely.
Alzheimer's when I'm old because I've got a metabolic dysfunction. Like I
Right.
don't want to do that to my
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the sleeve, I see what you're saying. You can't mess with it. So you have
Yeah.
to kind of take it as it is. And it sort of, do you feel like it is forcing you to make healthier choices when it comes to food?
Yeah, like for I would say since 2020, my husband and I had made, because we had been in the hospitality industry for many, many years, 20 years working in bars and restaurants. Um, and we just really changed the direction of our focus in life. We literally moved provinces so that we could start growing our own food because we want to have a farm. We
Wow.
raise our own beef. We want more control over what we're eating.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I read I think if I was ever going to suggest a couple things to bariatric patients for tools as far as outside of is 2 books. And the one book that got me started was a book about magnesium because I was so iron deficient with my band that I was getting iron infusions. And what was happening is I started getting spots on my neck because the iron actually wasn't uptaking. It was just being stored in tissue.
Hmm.
And so I started to learn like, okay, it's not just, oh, you're iron deficient, more iron. That is not what solves it.
Mm-hmm.
You need magnesium, you need copper, which copper doesn't activate without vitamin A, which, okay, so then that means nourishing foods. What is nourishing foods? So I had read this fantastic book that made me understand that my body has been magnesium deficient for like so long of my life. I can look back and go, oh, that is what all of this was. Is the single
Hmm.
best health improvement book I've read.
Really?
Yeah, love it.
Do you take a magnesium supplement or do you try to change your diet to get more magnesium?
Magnesium, I supplement.
Okay.
I I do not.
Okay, got it. I
Yeah,
also take a magnesium supplement and I have not read this book, so I don't know all of the things that it does, but I swear it makes me feel so much better and I don't really know why, but it just does.
it like changed my sleep. I
Yeah.
stopped having restless leg syndrome. I like the way it explains how copper, basically magnesium, copper, and iron, and one begets the other, begets the other.
Mm.
And so iron doesn't really leave the body. It just goes into a spot where if it's not being uptake, like brought out by these other minerals or these other elements, then it just sits there waiting to be used, but it can't be used because this thing's missing. And so
Interesting.
magnesium is like a catalyst for that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'll email you the book
Yeah,
because
that
I
sounds
think
I
it's
would love to read it. It sounds
yeah,
great.
yeah. I got it on Audible too, so I listened to it.
Oh,
But
nice. Nice.
yeah, and then the other book that I read, which I think every bariatric patient should read, is a book by Sally Fallon Morell, and it's a Nourishing Traditions book. And it talks about a dentist who it talks about the 11 principles of nourishing traditions, nourishing foods. And I kind of got into this because of my girlfriend being pregnant. And this Dr. Weston A. Price, he was a dentist. He started noticing in his practice, I think it was the late 1800s, early 1900s, that people were having like narrow palates and narrow, lots of disfigurement in the teeth, like lots of teeth growing in gnarly and messy, not enough room for wisdom teeth. And he's like, something's changing. What's going on? So he started traveling the globe and looking at the diets of native cultures around the world. And what were they eating? And why were their faces rounder? And their palates were broad and their teeth were white and straight. Like, they don't have dentists. They've never gone to dentists. Like, what's the difference? And so it was basically the introduction of highly processed, very palatable foods into the Western. So we aren't chewing food; we're mushing food on our tongue and swallowing it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this, I brought it here because I just think it's like rad. So it's nice. This book. So this one is what taught me about like how to prepare food. So for a lot of people who have been raised on a standard American diet, they don't know how to prepare food. They don't, you're asking bariatric patients to now eat differently for their stomach, but there's all these preparations that can be done to make food more bioavailable. And we especially need to know how to prepare food, because on a regular person's stomach, eating grains and swallowing them, there's a measure of it not getting processed. But for a bariatric patient, it's even more so. Yeah. So we need to pay even more attention to how things are processed or cooked and prepared and eaten.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point, and it's one of my goals has been to try to cut back on highly processed foods, but it's so hard in our lives. Even, I think we all know, like, things like chips, Doritos are super highly processed. I'm not going to eat those, but my protein shake is a processed food, and
absolutely
the meat sticks that I like for my little snacks, those are processed food. So it's really hard to actually cut out all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
but I think like I've looked at your shakes. I've looked at, like, you also have to consider all food is a process. Making sourdough is a process of food, right? You're processing.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Right? So you're taking it from this state and turning it this and then to this, and then it finally ends up at this. Mm-hmm. For me, the biggest thing that I stopped doing is I was so done reading labels that I was like, I'm not reading labels. In other words, I'm not buying food that has labels. That has a label that does not serve me. Yeah. I could do that. I'm a cook. I do lots of preservation at home. I do my own preservation of food. This is normal for how I was raised. Mm-hmm. For someone, though, that might be difficult. So having access for people in cities, that's the other part of this Nourishing Traditions, was the Weston A. Price Foundation has on their website, anyone can go there and find, in any city all over the globe, local farmers, local people that they can connect with in cities and get nourishing food. So it's not something that is exclusive.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's accessible for a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. You may have to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
You may have to do a little bit more.
In fact, you probably will if you want to eat that way. Yeah.
Will. But honestly, it's also simplified things so much. Like there's nights where we're just having steak and a vegetable. It's simple. I don't have to do a 5-course meat, potatoes, vegetables, buns, this, that, the other,
Yeah. Well, that's typically what we eat too. My boyfriend does all the cooking, but it's almost always just a meat and a veggie. and just
That's nice.
keep it as easy as possible. And sometimes I get, I want something a little bit more involved, but nine
Yeah.
times out of 10, that tastes good to me, makes me feel good,
Yeah.
nourishes us. And that's what we do.
I wanted to tell you this because I thought might enjoy it, but have you tried the beef isolate? It's just beef isolate. So
No.
we have it in Canada. It's called Canadian protein, but there is an American one, and it's a beef powder. And it's like 30 grams of protein, just like whey, but it's bovine. And I use that for like soups.
Oh, so
So
smart.
yeah, and it really beefs it up. And I feel like
That's
very satiated.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
Very
I just thought
cool.
I'd tell you that because I'm like, oh, she might like that. Because they say, you shouldn't have soups because you can overeat the soup or,
Yeah, it's
right.
like the mixing liquids and solids
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, I mean, I eat soups now, but I'm also 3 years out. It takes a
Yeah.
little while to get there.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are now about 3 months post-op. What are your goals? What are you looking forward to with this surgery? What are you hoping to achieve?
I mean, it's always going to be difficult for me to let go of the concept of not of wanting to be a size 4. I'm 5'10". Okay. So wanting to be 145 pounds or 150 pounds puts me at a very, you know, it's a lot of work. It's very hard to do for me. It's not easy. So I'm trying to find pleasure in the process and in contentment in that I feel really good right now. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel really good. I feel energetic. I feel motivated. I love the food I'm eating. I love the work I'm doing, the exercise I'm doing. All of those things are great. And so I like it to continue on. But I always, as everyone does, has that lingering fear that this isn't going to be as successful as I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that looks like after because there's a reason I personally didn't choose a bypass. And I don't know, is that the next step? I don't know. Or is it like
Yeah.
can I get someone to tighten? Like, have you ever heard of someone doing a revision on a VSG, like getting it tighter or getting it smaller?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have
So
you heard that?
it yeah, I actually did talk Dr. Smith, who was on the podcast. It'll now have been a couple of weeks when this comes out, but we talked about this about whether your stomach can actually stretch, and he said short answer is no, unless the surgery isn't done correctly. And there are cases where there's like too much of the stomach left behind, and then that can actually stretch. And I found this in my um, literature review on regain in bariatric populations that is a big contributor, is that like if the sleeve isn't made correctly, then
Yeah.
a portion is left behind and then that can stretch. And so yeah, there you can
Okay.
have a re-sleeve revision where they like remove that extra portion. A lot of times sleeve patients will do revisions to bypass or the duodenal switch, or I think that's how
Yeah.
you say that,
Yeah.
if they don't achieve the weight loss that they want to achieve. And then also GLP-1s are a big thing that a lot of people are adding in down the
Yeah.
line if they haven't quite reached the weight loss goals that they wanted to. So
Yeah.
I totally get the feeling of like, is this going to work? I hope I don't fail at this. Because I think for me, when I went in, it was like, this was the last resort. This was like the absolute, like, most dramatic thing I've ever done. If this doesn't work, nothing will work. And I wish I had had a different mindset going in. I have a much different mindset now that, like,
Yeah.
it is a tool. If it doesn't work for you or it doesn't work forever, there are other tools and you're not a lost cause. And this is a lifelong thing. And it's something that we'll all have to deal with for the rest of our lives. And this is just one tool, one step in the process. And if you need extra help later, that's okay too.
I hate that for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like food is one of those things that you want to pack up and put away and put on a shelf. Like I
Yeah.
want to pack it up and put it away, but it's just not the reality of the situation.
No, it's not. And I think in some ways, I actually think being on social media has been a really good thing for me because there are a lot of times where I could see myself like, I forget now what it's like to live in a bigger body. I sort of like that identity
Yeah.
has shifted in a way where like it's just like this is my life now, but I never want to forget it to the point where I go back there. And so
Yeah.
having this social media and support and this community and this podcast, it always like keeps it kind of front and center in my mind, and it keeps it
Yeah.
something that's like an important part of my life that I focus on, and I think I will forever, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. It- I guess my view now really isn't, as much as I do want the smaller sizes and I want the, like, I do, that is of course a huge bonus to it all. I I really want to age well. And by age well, I mean I want to be moving and doing and bending and gliding and lifting to my 90s.
Absolutely. That's a
Like, I just want to
huge
go to
thing.
sleep one day. I don't want it to be that this terrible degradation of my body. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things that I really focus on now is like, I love the micronutrients. I
Hmm.
love looking at my B12, my zinc, my magnesium, like all of the things that I'm getting. Oh, that's
Hmm.
exciting. That's like, I'm nourishing my body. My
Yeah.
bones are going to react this way. My hormones are going to do this, you know?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, it's such a big thing. I think when I was younger, all I wanted was to be thin because I
Yes.
cared what I looked like.
Yes.
Now I want to, I'm with you. I want to age well. I want to be able to move until I die. I don't want to,
Yes.
like, I don't want to have mobility issues
No.
as an older adult. And I think, yeah, I think that's so important. And I really like that you said you recognize that you have that kind of internal voice that's like, yeah, it would be great to get down to like a size 2 or a size 4 again, but that you feel really good now. And I think that's so important for anyone on a weight loss journey, whether it's, with GLP-1s or bariatric surgery or any other method of weight loss. Is I think it's, and I say this as someone who didn't do this well, it's really important to reframe what you define success
Mm-hmm.
as, because we get so caught up in these numbers of like, if I can lose 100 pounds, then I'll have been successful at this surgery. If I can get down to a normal BMI, then
Yeah.
it'll be a success. But really, I think success is so much more in how you feel and how you function and your quality of life and
Yeah.
all of those things that really drastically improve. That's what success is. And it's
Mhm.
okay to have weight loss goals. I'm not saying that, we
No.
shouldn't. And I think it's normal and it's human, and it's exciting to get into wonderland for the first time, and it's
Yes.
exciting to like, wear a certain size clothing that you haven't worn in a long time. All of that is great, and there's nothing wrong with having those goals, but honestly, I can say I the way that I feel now is so much more impactful than what I look like. And if you told me you can stay the size you are now, but you're going to feel like you felt before,
Mm.
or you can wear a size, I don't know, 14, but you can feel like you feel right now, I would pick feeling how I feel right
Yeah.
now over the looks, because it really is that much more impactful than just what size are in your pants.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's like really a very insignificant thing, and just like knowing that as you age, like the more muscle you have, the like your life expectancy is increased.
Yeah.
You get more life with muscle.
Yeah, and better quality of life. I don't want to
Yeah.
be in a nursing home, in a
No.
wheelchair, in a motorized scooter because I can't walk around. All of that sounds terrible. I want to age
Yeah.
really well and have like good life for as long as I'm around for.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So I'm really grateful. Uh, and I, have a good aftercare. Our surgeon
Good,
has
good.
lots of aftercare. So I have a whole blood panel that I'm doing this week, and I'll look at that and examine that to see that I'm staying, that my body is meeting all its needs. So
Yeah,
that's good.
that's good. Good.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Athena, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. I think you have such a unique perspective, having kind of done this twice now. I really think you have so much to share, and I feel like I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have learned a lot. You are not on social media, but if people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
At my email, AthenaB_2000 at live.ca. It's a long
Okay.
one, but I'm more than welcome to answer questions or be there for people who also kind of want to remain private too. You know, they need
Yeah.
someone, right?
Absolutely. And we will put that in the show notes. You have that link there. If you want to find the podcast on social media, we're at Former Fat Friend Pod. I'm at Maintaining Kasey. Athena, thank you again for being here. And
Thanks for having me.
we'll see you next week.
Bye.